Can you just talk us through the events of the last few days from your perspective? When did you become aware of the situation with the players that they'd gone out and the repercussions that have followed over the last few days?
Well, we first aware really in the reaction to a positive test on Tuesday's testing from one of the players, and obviously the timeline thereon after, which then by association, the players being out together and the fallout from that, finding out those players' movements, and then having another positive test yesterday as part of that group. Obviously there's a far wider issue going on in Aberdeen at the minute, and obviously these numerous clusters that have appeared, and obviously the current restrictions we're now under. So we were mindful of and probably a wee bit more apprehensive about that second testing yesterday, and as a consequence of that, we have now got a second player testing positive. So the timeline and the situation from the players being out, we feel well versed now. As an investigation been on, we want to get to the bottom of it because there's a health issue there as well as a discipline issue.
Nicola Sturgeon has said this lunchtime that the players blatantly broke the rules. Can you clarify what the rules are and which rules they broke?
Well, in terms of the rules, the 4 household rule, as you're all aware, being out together in that number is a breach of those guidelines and rules. We are disappointed. We'd always encourage players to go out socially in terms of going for meals and all the rest of it, but it's always at the right time. And just now, certainly, it isn't the right time. That these the current restrictions we're under, players have got to have added responsibility and be far more measured and make better decisions than going out in a group. So for that point of view, they're wrong. The fact the added matter for myself, having lost in a very important game, having been at Aberdeen long enough, the players are well aware as well that you don't go over the door if you lose a game to Rangers, and that for me is clearly added a lot of anger and disappointment as well. But going out for a meal in isolation and the right amount of numbers, which they weren't, it would have been absolutely fine. The where for me where this starts to take, where my anger comes from and my disappointment really comes in, is the fact that they then proceeded to go in to another pub, out with the restaurant, and that for me is where the whole thing changes as well.
Do you feel let down by the players?
Yeah, listen, we have made well aware the responsibilities of us all. It wasn't so long ago, and I've been speaking often enough about how grateful we were for the opportunity to get back playing football. Our club have done everything to the letter. We've jumped through all the hoops, put all the right protocols in place. Our club could not have done any more to protect our bubble. At the training ground and at Pittodrie when we play games, we are confident that our players will not be infected at work. But as you know, we only have them so many hours of the day. That responsibility falls on each and every one of us when we go out. And as lockdown restrictions, I know they're back in Aberdeen now, but as over the last few weeks these restrictions start to ease and people start to normalise and get back to a way of life that they maybe once had, the players, it's been clear to them, we have to continue as if we're in a lockdown. We cannot put ourselves more at risk and have the impact of what we're trying to do here, which is playing football. The players are full of regret, they've made a real bad error of judgment. Every one of them I've spoken to, and they're full of regret, and rightly so. And the anger and disappointment comes because they've put themselves in that position, and now the ramifications of what is now taking place. We are so remorseful at the fact that this is an impact in Scottish football, because a few weeks ago we were absolutely delighted that we had the opportunity to get back to playing football, albeit without supporters, but our fans responded, the willingness to support and stand by the club, and for that disappointment for our fans now that we have jeopardised that by the players' actions is extremely disappointing. And you know, all I can say is we have to reinforce our messaging about what they do away from work. We all have that responsibility. The players will be dealt with internally, a breach of discipline, as you would expect. And my concentration now, after obviously today, is to try and focus on the players who can now help the club win games. And we are now without those players for a period of time, and we need to try and get back to hopefully being allowed to play football. But I understand totally the anger and sentiment aimed towards us at the minute, and for that we're deeply sorry.
Derek, it's Stephen Duff at the BBC. Sorry, don't you go, Chris?
Sorry, Derek, it's Chris McLaughlin here.
Hi, Chris.
Will there be an internal investigation, and do you expect any recriminations from the SPFL?
Well, we've because of the timeline and the players infected, we're pretty far down the line. We feel we've got a good handle on what actually did occur, and what is clear is, as I said, Chris, is the fact that players have made such a poor judgment call, and the fact of the matter is they've put us everybody at an additional risk. There's a wider area going on in Aberdeen, as you know, and the players are partly responsible for their role in that with their actions. Aberdeen itself at the minute it's their turn, it's our turn up here at the minute. It may well be somebody else further down the line. So in answer to your question about ramifications, who knows? We have to deal with what's in front of us, and for that we don't know just yet. But I think it would be I think unrealistic to think there may not be similar areas in Scotland throughout the season that may well have the restrictions and issues with this virus. But from our part, we have played a part in that with my players' actions, and you know understand the anger at the minute, how it's jeopardised what was a real shot in the arm when we get a chance to get back playing football again. We all championed that, we all were pushing for it, and you know, we have done so much as a club. We have, as a club, have not took our responsibilities lightly, but like the decision making with the players on Saturday that were involved, then they have put that at risk. So we understand any sort of bad sentiment towards us at the minute, and criticisms.
There seems to be a little bit of confusion generally about what a sporting bubble looks like and what players are and are not allowed to do out with football. Can you clarify, from the club's point of view, your understanding of this so-called sporting bubble?
Well, we don't want to put our players at more risk. We understand that players have families, and obviously we went through a lockdown period there where we didn't get a chance to see families, but we also have been mindful that while we can protect and do all we can within our bubble, within the training facility, within Pataudry, those procedures are a bit more difficult to safeguard against when you're out there. So it's generally common sense. Don't put yourself in positions where you're in crowded areas, that you are in a position where you're going out in groups of people, and try to minimise that risk. The protocols are pretty clear on that, and like I say, we have tried to impart onto the players and the staff, and we'll continue to do that, obviously with a lot more stronger messaging now. The fact that I feel as though, and I treat it like we're almost still in a lockdown, and we all know what that felt like, what we went through. And I do think that to protect us, it's exactly for this sort of situation arising, Chris, because you know, if one goes down, you know, my staff, I've got staff that normally travel in together, but we don't allow them to travel in together at the minute, because if one member of staff goes down, the other goes down. We don't allow players to travel in together unless the younger lads who are staying in the same digs or living in the shared accommodation, if they're because we don't want to we want to make sure that at the training ground there's 3 and 4 in a changing room, no more than that. So we're conscious, and it's that sort of thinking that we want to try and ask the players to then take that into their public life and when they're away from work. Because if one goes down, as it's seen there, if a couple of the boys are affected by association, 8 players now missing from selection, and difficulties that has, not only from a health point of view, but certainly from a professional point of view. And that for me is this situation is what we've been working so hard to avoid.
Derek, have you been in touch with anybody from St Johnstone? Obviously, you've got a very good relationship with them.
Yeah.
Spoke to Callum. Was that a difficult conversation?
No, I tried to call Callum this afternoon. I don't know if they're out training now that the game's off, but I tried to call him this afternoon prior to doing the media. But I will. And listen, we apologetic. I wouldn't like that disruption in my preparation for the team. But like I say, it's us and now. It's not to say it can't be somebody else in the future. But from our part, I will be speaking to Callum and offering my apologies that we're not only disrupting our own game ourselves, but certainly their preparations, and that is unfair. That is unfair.
And is it whether the next week's games will go ahead? Is that something?
I don't know, Gavin. I'm hopeful we can get back to playing football and the focus is back onto the game. It's certainly going to be a challenge in terms of team selection, and it won't be. There'll be a lot of players, key players missing. But I do think it's important we get back to football. I think it'll be probably important to see how the wider region is in terms of where we are on that side of it, and also the results of further testing. Like every club, there's always that nervousness about testing and what the results may give out, and that's added now at the minute with the situation in the city, and also the situation we now have within the club, and that's why I'm angry that we've allowed that to get into our club, and it's bitterly disappointing.
Derek, did you give the players any warnings before last weekend, or did you just trust them to use their judgment?
Warnings in what sense, sorry?
About socialising at the weekend or going into bars and pubs?
No, again, we were training the next day, so it wasn't. You would assume that there would be a level of restraint there. I think I've been up here a long time, but regardless of how long you've been here, every player knows that you don't go over the door if you've lost to Rangers up here, and that part of it disappoints me. Going for a meal, ordinarily, there's no a club in the land that would punish their players for going for a meal in normal circumstances, regardless of the situation. But for me, as I said earlier there, when the players made the decision to then, after dinner, go on to a pub, that's where the disappointment and the anger comes from, that decision making, not the fact that they went out for dinner after a game. And not all players will be like the staff. We all go back, we analyse the game, we look for answers, win, lose or draw. We look for that. That's our Saturday night after a game ordinarily. But the players they've got lives, but they've got to make good decisions, and they've got to make even better decisions in the current climate. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Okay, thank you.
Apologise to you for this. Derek, hi. Have the players apologised to you? Because many would say they've let you down, and they've let themselves down, they've let the club down, and the fans down. Yeah,
no, they have. I've spoke to them all individually. Obviously, players, they're well aware that they've made a huge error of judgment. They're full of remorse, disappointment. They get what they've done, and our fans have been absolutely brilliant throughout this in terms of the last few months. They've worked hard to make sure that the club's there and ready in a position to play games, and despite the fans not being allowed back into the stadium, the club has worked equally as hard to try and put us in a position where we can be playing and training in a safe environment, to give us the confidence that we can go on and have fulfil the fixtures and be part of Scottish football. So the players understand now the wider ramifications. you know, they're getting a kicking at the minute. They're going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to take it. And at the minute, as I say, they're going to have to. They are full of remorse, and they understand. We will now, as I say, over the course of the next few days, hopefully try to prepare for a game against Hampton at Pittodrie, with the players that are available, with the players that I now have. They for me at this moment are the important players for me. All right, thank you.